by Stephen.
So the only one that we didn't get, Nitty was not coming.
Yeah, see, I could do that because I'm going to put her name tag up there
Hey,
too.
Doug, is Nitty coming in?
She came in last night as far as I know.
Okay. Okay. She was, okay. All right, well then why don't we go ahead and get started?
Available on the 320.
Think,
It's off right now. Okay.
We set to go? Got a thumbs up. All right, well, good. Hey, welcome everybody to sunny San Diego in our beautiful weather. This is the April 20th, 2018 meeting of the Road Charge Technical Advisory Committee here at Caltrans headquarters in San Diego, and I want to thank you all for being here. It's our first meeting of the TAC, of the 3 TAC meetings we have scheduled for 2018. And the primary role, as you know, this year for the TAC is really to look at recommendations that'll get forwarded on to the CTC and then on to the legislature for their consideration. And Senate Bill 1077, which many of you are familiar with, which created the Road Charge Technical Advisory Committee and the pilot, also required that CTC, through the TAC, prepare recommendations to the legislature for the next steps. And you know, what's happening right now is that there's a bill, and what's the bill number, the continuation bill? Anybody remember? 1328. 1328. So Senate Bill 1328 is currently pending, wending its way through the legislature, and assuming that it's enacted, the efforts of the TAC will continue. It's a bill that the Commission, through its annual report, recommended to the legislature, and as always, the legislature reads the Commission's reports, and many of them then sponsor bills as a result. So, you know, as we look forward into and the idea was to make the Road Charge Technical Advisory Committee a permanent entity. I believe that's what it was up until, I think it was a 5 years. What was it?
2023?
2023, yeah.
Longer term.
Longer term
It's a
than,
longer
than ending the end of this year. Oh, there she is, Nitty, welcome. Welcome, no worries. So anyhow, why don't we call the roll, and then I'll go on with some additional comments just to kind of kick us off. So Doug, do you want to help us out with that?
Senator Bell, Assemblymember Chu, Eric Sauer,
Here.
Terry Benzel,
Here.
Lee Tien, Lisa Bartlett, Lauren Kay, Nidhi Kalra,
Here.
Pam O'Connor,
Here.
Richard Mark Antonio,
Here.
Robert Poitras, Vice Chair Finnegan,
Here.
Susan Ornelas,
Here.
Chairman Daffer.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Very good. Well, thank you again. And Professor Wax. Professor Wax is definitely present. Yes, the record reflects Professor Wax is in attendance. Thank you very much, Marty, for being here. So kind of continuing on, assuming the TAC is continued, then kind of what it does is we move into some more of the other policy issues like what might be a per mile charge. So that would be something we would look at in 2019, or how funds could be used. We heard during all of the speaking circuit we did in 2015, people were talking about maybe levels of income and how that might be done. So there's these issues and many more that I think we would probably get into. But some of the topics that we have, that we put on the agenda today, and I want to thank Garth and Susan and the whole CTC staff that worked on that, is really kind of to help move us in the direction of where we will formulate recommendations going into the following year. So we've got some great speakers that are here today, and the idea is to really help assist the TAC in developing recommendations for future steps on a possible road charge for California in the future. And also mention that transportation commissioners from Washington, Oregon, and California are going to be holding a joint meeting in San Francisco August 14th and 15th this year. And one of the big topics that will be on the agenda is road charge. As you know, both Oregon has been leading the country on the road charge front, and then Washington State is also very much along. And so the commissioners from these 3 states are planning to sign a joint letter supporting federal consideration of a federal national road charge. So things are moving along. And of course, for members of the audience that are here, we always welcome public and public comment. And also, in case for those of you who hadn't met him before, Doug Remedios from the Commission. Doug is the administrative staff person who assists the regular CTC meetings, and he's acting in the same capacity today. He always has things running smoothly. And Ann Johnson, who was the TAC's longtime administrative staff person, is no longer at the Commission. And again, if somebody wishes to speak, just fill out a speaker slip. Doug will hold them up there, and just please go ahead and give that to him. As always, these meetings are webcast live and will be, of course, on the CTC's website. So we've got a full agenda. I will do everything I can to keep us on schedule. And if there's things that we don't get on today, it'll be on the September 7th meeting, which I believe, Garth, is in LA. Is that the Los Angeles meeting is September 7th? We'll be in LA. So we've already done item 1. We've called the roll. Let's start off and see if we have any public comments, speaker slips. Anybody in the audience to kick us off? All right, hearing none, then let's go to item 3 on the agenda, which is the approval of the minutes from our meeting that we had in Riverside. Some of you might remember that well, as I do, from December 8th, 2017.
I'll move approval.
All right, we have a motion from Finnegan. Is there a second? Second. All right, second from Marcantonio. Any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, they are, any opposed? And an abstention from Kay. All right. I don't know, Garth, if you want to review any of the stuff that we went over from that meeting, just for purposes of anybody, or if there's any questions from anything, but otherwise we will keep moving.
Yeah, just real quickly, what we did send out, Caltrans did have a copy. We did discuss at the December meeting, the TAC meeting, the Caltrans report. The link was sent out at that time, following the TAC meeting. And I know Caltrans will be sending out hard copies of the Caltrans road charge pilot report to all of the TAC members following this meeting.
All right, thank you very much. So on number 4, which is member reports, this is usually where we have any of us that have been out and about talking with folks on this issue. I know it's been relatively quiet. Yeah, Mayor?
But I've just been thinking that as I'm talking to people, very few people know anything about this. Of course, they're not paying attention to it. But so I was thinking that, we should have a marketing plan. And really, in the next few years, as we're moving towards this, target certain opinion makers, get them to write my words, op-ed pieces, just kind of keep something slowly moving forward so that if it gets introduced, say, in 4 years or something like that, people know about it. And they've because once I've explained it to them, they can accept it. But when I first mention it to them, they hate it. So I just want to put that out there, that I think we should have some thoughts about marketing it.
Well, I think what we'll do is we'll have, on item number 8, Brady will give an update. I don't know, Brady, if you're going to talk about some of the focus groups that you guys have done and those things. So, yeah, Mayor, I think we're moving in that direction. But again, trying to stay focused and take the input like we get from today. And your suggestion is absolutely applicable as we move forward into next year. Steve?
If I could just add on to that very briefly, I think you're right, that over time, we need to introduce this into the public consciousness. Although I would caution us not to have a marketing campaign in a support campaign mode, more of an education campaign, to let people know about the issues, what's being considered, what are some options, and then bring people along, is what I would suggest on that.
Have multiple voices
Right.
speaking it in their communities, different things like
Absolutely.
that, so you can open people up to it.
Excellent suggestion. Hitty.
And I haven't been here for a while.
You know how we do these meetings? Everybody just jump in.
Right. But, I'm intrigued by the idea of a national consideration of this issue. It, in many ways, seems unfathomable that this could get traction at that level. And yet, I take your point that a very first step is for the idea of road charge to simply become part of the vocabulary, which it isn't right now. Gas tax barely is, other than no. And so what would it look like? I think it'd be valuable for us to be part of the conversation of what does it look like to make this part of American vocabulary, that this is a thing, which it's not right now.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's, and I have done quite a bit of speaking at a number of events from Cal Trucking to just earlier this week, both Susan and I were at American Public Works in Orange County, or I guess that's LA County. Was it Orange County or LA? We were in Carson. So that's LA County. Yeah, that's right on the other side of the line. So I speak a number of places on the whole issue of road charge. And to Nitty's point, one of the things that I typically will tell people is back in the day in 1918, 1922, when California started, and we all got 8 to 10 miles of the gallon, you all paid for what you drove. The more you drove, the more you paid. But there's such an inequity today because of, people that have zero emission vehicles, people that have 50 mile per gallon vehicles, or people that still drive 10 mile per gallon vehicles. And, the idea of the user fee was always the issue. We called it a user fee. It was just happened to be paid for with a gas tax. But it's now this inequity has been built out. So how we market that and how we end up getting it back to what it really is, and it's a user fee. It's a user fee. Gas tax was a horrible name. It's easy to campaign against because it's that. Nobody likes a tax, and nobody wants a tax on their gas. But people understand the fact that, yeah, you do have to pay to drive the roads, and the more you drive, the more you got to pay. Lauren?
Thank you. I think this is a great topic for discussion, and I think that there's an obvious need to educate Californians and California leaders about the user charge that we're talking about. For myself, as much as I like to talk about this, I've resolved to not talk much about it between now and November. And I think that that's, I'm not going to insist anybody else follow my lead, but I just think that there's so much education that needs to be done of leaders and voters on what the legislature did last year as far as raising transportation revenues, that adding something that's at this point theoretical into the mix is probably not helpful.
Yeah, I take your point to heart very well. And in fact, I think that's part of where I'm trying to steer our group to get into those issues coming into 2019. Clearly, and I'm happy to say it, with Senate Bill 1 in the balance for November. Even an equally important measure is on the June ballot, Prop 69, which constitutionally protects the rest of the funds. Gas tax funds are already constitutionally protected, but there's some additional funds that are not. Prop 69 ties those down. And again, the idea is so the public can have greater confidence that lawmakers and the government is not going to take their transportation dollars and use it for something besides transportation. And so Prop 69 comes first in June, and then we'll see if the Senate Bill 1 repeal effort gets qualified. If it does, that's going to be an interesting fight between now and November, and one that I personally am against and think it's a stupid move. But I can say that because it's my opinion. So anyhow, and then just kind of give an overview of some of the things that we've got on our agenda today. Oh, I'm sorry, Pam, I apologize.
Right, no, and you had mentioned talking about a possible national user fee, and I participated with the National League of Cities for a while, and this year I'm lucky enough to be chair of their transportation committee.
Wonderful.
And at the last policy committee meeting in Washington, D.C. in March, this is elected officials from cities throughout the United States. There was more and more discussion from folks in different parts of the country about a user fee, and that at the national level. And the National League of Cities is holding their, they have two meetings a year, and their annual city summit is being held in Los Angeles in November. And hopefully we're going to be connecting with you all and have someone come and talk about the California program at the NLC City Summit.
Yeah, no, I talked with Carolyn Coleman from the California League, and she was mentioning to me about NLC in November, and it would probably be a really good time to share, because you all are familiar with the whole Ruck West effort, and Brady will probably talk about that a little bit, and that is 13 or 14 states that are working together. Now the idea is to really try to get this, and every time I have met with people at DOT, not so much in this last year, but in the prior administration, there was a very strong interest in road charge as a national program. So it's just a matter of time as we continue to move forward. Yeah, Steve?
Another quick item, I just want to thank Garth for providing me with a supply of the summary reports. I was able to use those at a meeting earlier this year with the LA Chamber of Commerce, just to update them on what's going on and share information about our efforts.
Yeah, and those things are available if anybody needs those for any talks that you're going to give or anything like that. The links are on the website, the final report. There's the summary report. There's simple brochures. Garth is holding up one right now. It's a very easy to read document that gives an excellent summary as to what this is all about. Eric?
Just to follow up on Jim's comments, he came to our annual membership conference meeting in late January and presented kind of the lay of the land of what's going on with the road charge, and then we also had a lively discussion about SB 1 and the possible or the effort to repeal it. Jim did a great job on presenting on that as well. Prior to that, so I'm going to go back before the last meeting, because I apologize I wasn't at the last meeting. We had a discussion with our policy committee that has jurisdiction over us participating in the pilot, and as most of you know, we did vote to support us to stay a part of the advisory committee, so we supported the bill. It's kind of an interesting conversation with our members since they already voted to support it, and we had to kind of remind them that we were on the advisory committee. Oh, mission accomplished. And then I've got I spoke to a group in all of my presentations throughout the state to other trade organizations. I do talk about this in one of my talking points, road charge, talk about the pilot, give them a little bit of color on participants who participated in it and the results of it and whatnot. So I'll be doing that as well on, I believe it's May 4th up in Tahoe with the trade group. It's part of my presentation up there. So.
Excellent. Much appreciated. All right, any other comments on things we've been doing? Okay, great. Well, let's talk about, on item 5 on the agenda is kind of an overview, and so as mentioned, the final report that Garth showed up, that held up, we did distribute that at our December Technical Advisory Committee meeting, and it's really a good overview of what happened in the 5,000 vehicle pilot over the 9 months. And there's a number of recommendations for next steps, and as Brady will talk about, they're currently following up on a lot of those recommendations, and some will be included in our recommendations as well. And so, as I mentioned earlier, there's 2 TAC meetings remaining additional for 2018, September 7th in Los Angeles, and then November 16th in Sacramento. And at the September meeting, what we're going to ask the TAC to do there is to conduct a final review of what those next steps are. And some of what we're talking about today will help move in that direction. And, again, at the November meeting, we'll discuss future steps of road charge. That's assuming that SB 1328 had passed, of course, by our November meeting. That's past the governor's signature deadline, so we will know then if the governor had signed that into law. And so assuming he does, we'll have a very healthy agenda at our November meeting as we package up what we're going to be doing in the years ahead. And again, because you guys have been, most of you have been here since the beginning, it, to me, was real important to the commission that we continue the Technical Advisory Committee because you've got the expertise and you've got, frankly, a lot of knowledge that few other people have in the state that have been able to see things as from the perspectives that you have. So I think it's very important. So for today, we've got UC Davis is here to kind of give an overview. They've got a statutorily required study on fees for zero-emission vehicles and low-emission vehicles. We've got an update on SB 1 implementation, and again, an overview of 1328. And we've got 2 panels that we set up today. And what we did in that was really to further explore how road charge could be administered and how that could work, how we might phase it in for vehicles that are operating on California roads today. Because, it's not going to just, I always tell people, this isn't happening next week. It's not even happening perhaps in 5 years. It might be 10 years, but it's going to be a phase in and how we do that. And so the first panel is individuals representing state government, transportation network company, and commercial trucking. And so rather than do individual presentations, it's kind of, as we like to do, more informal Q&A type of thing. The second panel is going to be representative to talk about the International Fuel Tax Agreement, or IFTA, and how that works from diesel taxes administered across the state and on international boundaries. And then also Oregon's experience with their road charge. Maureen Bach, Origo's program manager, she's here to talk about their experiences. And then also an update from the consultant that Caltrans has hired to study road charge related to policy issues. And lastly, we've got somebody from DMV that's going to give us kind of an overview as well. So that's kind of the Reader's Digest version of the meeting today. We got a lot on there, so with that, why don't I turn it over to Garth for item 6 on the agenda to give us an overview of Senate Bill 1328 and what that's all about.
Okay, thank you very much.
And we're looking for support. I think what I want to do is get Garth to give a report so I can ask our TAC to
Sure.
weigh in and support, assuming you like what he has to say.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and as Commissioner Murdaffer did mention, this is an action item. The reason being, we're looking to see if the TAC would support SB 1328. And as many of you do recall, back in 2014, SB 1077 was a bill that created the road charge TAC and required that the pilot program, that Caltrans prepare that or conduct a pilot program. And the bill also stated that the commission is to include recommendations in its annual report to the legislature. And the legislature set a sunset date for all these requirements to be completed, the pilot and the TAC of January 1st, 2019. And one of the recommendations in the CTC's annual 2017 annual report to the legislature was a continuance of the road charge TAC. To address the need to extend the mission of the TAC, Senator Bell introduced SB 1328 this session. And a copy of the bill has been included in each of the member packets. As currently written, this bill would extend the role of the TAC 5 more years until January 2023. Other provisions of SB 1077 regarding the composition of the TAC would say the same, and as currently written in SB 1328, and that essentially concludes. It's a pretty short and simple bill, and that concludes my presentation on this particular item.
Mr. Finnegan.
I'll move a support position on the, from the TAC for this bill.
All right.
Second.
A motion. Second from Mayor. Any questions or comments on it? Eric? We'll make sure we let Randy Chin know.
Yeah.
So he can. Okay. So Garth, could we follow up with the Senate Transportation Consultant and make sure they know that? You guys have to send in letters. Did you send in letters? Yeah. You did? Okay.
I just need to be clear that I need to abstain from
Anything
whatever we
political.
decide, yes.
Understand. We understand the RAND Corporation and its rules. Absolutely. Not a problem. All right. Any other discussion on the bill, on the motion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? And one abstention. All right. That carries very well. Thank you so much. Yeah, Richard.
One comment. The language that the bill adds is really just this one sentence, right? That commencing 2019, the TAC shall also assess the potential for mileage-based revenue collection for California roads and highways as an alternative to the gas tax system. And I think that encompasses the bullet points you addressed earlier, but it's not the clearest language. Do you read that as a pretty encompassing?
I think we're going to have a pretty broad authority with it being continued. It was pretty specific in 1077 where we were restricted really not to talk about rates. It was, and showed as a replacement, which this would still continue on. But I think you'll have a little bit more latitude. And that's what the legislature is looking for.
So point of clarification, were SB 1 to be repealed, that doesn't change this, because this language says as an alternative to gas tax, not any particular gas tax, which SB 1 is.
That's correct.
A particular version of a gas tax.
However, if SB 1 were repealed, if you read the repeal language, in order for a road charge to go into place, I believe it would take a 2/3 vote of the public. Yeah, I think it was a 2/3 vote of the
Of
public.
the public.
Yeah.
Is it a majority?
A vote of the public.
Just a vote, a majority vote? All right, a majority vote. That's right, two-thirds of the legislature on tax, I apologize. So a majority vote to put it into place, which would probably never happen.
But it doesn't.
I wouldn't sell the public short so much, but go ahead.
But it doesn't.
I don't want to.
But it doesn't change the mission of this committee and this
Correct.
commission. Assuming 1328 is passed, whether or not SB1 is repealed, we still have a charge.
Absolutely. In fact, if SB1 were repealed, the effort of this group is going to be all eyes will be on alternatives. Lauren? Microphone.
And if the ballot measure that's being circulated qualifies and is passed, it only repeals the gas tax that was passed last year, not the
Correct.
and not the existing gas tax that was the underlying.
In place previously.
18 cents or whatever it is.
Yeah, Marty, then I'll go to,
If it were repealed, we would go back to the gas tax swap legislation. It doesn't repeal that, and my analysis of that is that it was a pretty terrible program, but my understanding is that SB1 would not, if it were to be repealed, then we would go back to the annual adjustment of
The way it
the
was.
sales tax portion of the gas tax.
sir, would you identify yourself?
Yes, Alan Jen, EC Davis. I was just wanting to clarify for the language of the bill that is specifying as a gas tax replacement, does that provide purview for alternative fuels as well?
Well, that's a good question. We've always assumed that it does, because one of the issues, as you'll hear in the program today, and I know you're part of that, is right now electric vehicles don't pay anything. And during the pilot, we piloted telematics on board electric vehicles, and the assumption is they would also be paying. The idea is to equalize it. No matter what your fuel type, if you're driving on the road and you drive a mile, you pay for that mile. And we want to get our Caltrans finance expert to come up and tell us what we really need to know.
So I think Marty has it correct. If the repeal does go through, we revert to the old system of the annual adjustments for the gas tax. I also believe that the bill as currently written is asking you for an alternative to the current system. It says gas tax system, but it's really the system of taxation that we use to pay for our highway system. Gives you tremendous latitude, and I think you should embrace that latitude.
Excellent point. Thank you very much. All right. So we did vote on that measure, on that item. We had some additional clarification, so thank you very much. Why don't we then move to item 7 on the agenda, and that's an update on Senate Bill 1. Speaking of Senate Bill 1, so Garth, tell us about that and the $5.2 billion annually that's going to bring.
Sure. As reported at prior TAC meetings, SB1, or the Road Repair and Accountability Act of 2017, was signed by the governor almost exactly 1 year ago today on April 28, 2017. As a result of this legislation, California will generate an additional $5.2 billion annually to maintain and rehabilitate our transportation infrastructure. Since the passage of SB1, the California Transportation Commission has been very busy to prepare and adopt guidelines for some of the new funding programs that were identified in the legislation. The Commission will be adopting and allocating the funding for the following 3 new funding programs at our May CTC meeting. These 3 new programs are Solutions for Congested Corridors, Trade Corridor Enhancement, and the competitive portion for the Local Partnership Program. And also, I also wanted to make note that, one of the new funding programs that directly benefits cities and counties is the Local Streets and Roads Program, which essentially doubles the amount of funding that's available for local streets and roads for maintaining and operating maintaining the local streets and road system, and then also for developing new bike and ped facilities as well. Caltrans, along with local and regional agencies, are beginning to program a number of the SB1 funded transportation projects throughout the state, and we should start seeing, hopefully, actual construction within the next few months or so on some of these fundings. Attached to the book item is an update on the Commission's implementation. It's a little fact sheet on the Commission's role in terms of implementing SB1, and it provides essentially a fact sheet on SB1 for the TAC members. And that concludes my presentation.
Questions on Senate Bill 1? Thank you, Garth.
I was at a CalCog meeting, and basically, they were really trying to kind of push us to make sure that, and this is probably at the level of government I'm at, but that as we're doing things, as we're doing projects, they said, even if you're filling a pothole, have a little sign, paid by SB1. Because again, people don't know these things, but if we sort of subtly keep marketing that, then people see it and then repeal that, they'll think, oh, wait, I filled my pothole, so just wanted to share that.
No, it's a good point, and thanks, Susan. At that CalCog meeting, it was interesting, this kind of gets the nitties thing too, because gas taxes, we found when we were doing the road charge initial focus groups, we found out the public really didn't even know and think much about a gas tax. I now know they don't like it, but didn't really know a lot about it. In fact, I think you guys have heard me say before, when we did that very first question, we asked how a road's paid for, nobody once mentioned the words gas tax. It was everything from, property tax, sales tax. My favorite was adopt a highway signs. But they never said gas tax. And, talk about SB1. I think it was Kern County we learned at the CalCog meeting. They actually got a campaign saying, gas tax dollars at work, which the state didn't embrace that. The state went along with SB1. We'll see if that ends up working out or not, because I think they didn't go along with it because gas tax isn't so popular, but interesting. But thank you for that comment. Anything else on SB1? Richard? And Eric?
Where are these projects being sort of made available on a website or county by county?
Susan can give you
so the public knows about
lists.
So the projects that have been identified to date are on the Commission's website, but more importantly, there's a website called rebuildingcalifornia.ca.gov, and that is it's a coalition that's formed with the CSAC, the League, business industry, and the state, and really that's a clearinghouse or a holding house, a reporting tool that there's a map, interactive map that you can highlight in an area, and all the drop-down lists will come up with projects, so you can see that. There's a lot of eyes right now on the commission. On Wednesday, the commission staff will be releasing recommendations for 3 of the largest competitive programs. It's less than $3 billion, about over $2.5 billion, $2.7 billion in project recommendations that'll be coming out. And that will be on the Commission's website. That won't be on the Rebuilding California website yet. And that list projects, or the Commission will take action to consider adopting that at the May meeting. And so really, I think we all just need to work together on communicating what, we have more than 4,000 local streets and roads projects that have already been identified just in that one program alone, and how we're communicating that and telling the story of what that is going to do. Because I hear, and I'm sure you do, that the gas tax money and the transportation improvement fees, they're not going to go to transportation. But what we know in, the Commission is that at the end of May, and at the May meeting, the Commission will have identified projects for over $9 billion in funding. And will, in total, $25 billion worth of funds will be lined up for projects throughout the state. And so this money is going to transportation improvements. And so I appreciate that question. The Rebuilding California website is really the best tool. And if you see areas that we could improve that, let us know.
Eric, you want to comment about SB1?
Just adding to it, which is interesting, and I know this has been discussed, and we're an active member of the coalition as well, our organization is the federal discussion on what the infrastructure program or plan could look like is big on leveraging state dollars. So that's a huge concern if this program, SB1, does get repealed, if the feds do come out with that, if that's what the program actually ends up being, is the leveraging of those funds, we could be in a bigger predicament by not having the ability to leverage those funds from SB1.
All right, any other questions, comments regarding SB1? If not, let's move over to item 8 on the agenda, and that's an update from Brady on road charge. And there's been some recent changes there. Norma Ortega, who many of you recall, was the CFO for Caltrans. She has retired. She was the lead on road charge, and that was a tough loss as far as I'm concerned for Caltrans and for road charge. Knowing her, though, I'm sure she'll pop up someplace and will still be involved somehow or another. And then the other change at Caltrans is Carrie Porvahidi, who many of you remember, who was the longtime road charge manager for Caltrans. She moved to another position at Caltrans where she's now in charge of SB1 as the program manager, and she's responsible for all general oversight of SB1 for Caltrans, which is really an important spot. So with that, I don't know, Brady, are you going to kick it off, or?
If you don't mind, I'd like to jump in front of Brady.
All right, please. Thank you.
So I apologize for not introducing myself when I first stepped up to the podium. My name is Stephen Keck. Some of you may remember me from about 3 years ago when this first TAC meeting kicked off. I gave the presentation that really kind of showed why we think the existing gas tax system is doomed. So I'm happy to be back here. As Commissioner Madaffer mentioned, Norma has retired. She is currently finishing up her first week in retirement. And those of you that have gotten to know her can probably imagine she's not taking it lying down. Yesterday, I received an email from her at 6:30 in the morning, and she tells me that every morning she's getting up, writing a list of 5 things to do, and getting to work. So I kind of think she's taking it on by the horns, and her retirement is going to be really something. So the reason I'm here is I'm currently acting in the role of CFO for Caltrans, so I'm sitting in for her today, and I'm completing my first week in that role, and it's been quite exciting. I've been the budget officer for Caltrans for more than 8 years, so this funding is near and dear to my heart. I'm very excited to get in on what the TAC is doing and working with you going forward. Commissioner Madaffer, you hit my other 2 talking points. So about what Carrie's doing, I don't know if you mentioned, or maybe I didn't hear it, that Brady has been appointed as the acting head of the road charge program. We all know his work, his knowledge and leadership will help things move forward completely uninterrupted and without any hiccups. And thank you, Brady, for taking on that role, and I look forward to working with the TAC as we move forward.
Thank you, Stephen. Well, we look forward to continuing working with you. We know you've always been right there next to Norma. Now you're stepping into the role, so congrats.
Yeah, big shoes to fill.
Yeah.
Big shoes. Thank you.
That's great. Brady, do you want to kind of give us what you've been up to?
Sure. Thank you, Chairman Daffer and committee members. Since the pilot's concluded, we certainly haven't been in cruise control. We've been working a lot in the background on continuing the research effort. In the summaries that were provided, I think at the December meeting, I'll touch on a couple items that you'll see are right in alignment with some of the next steps that we identified in the report. And I'm going to spend the bulk of today's presentation on our work with the FAST Act research grant program that we've been working on. And so just a quick reminder, the Surface Transportation System Funding Alternatives Grant was a 5-year program and had $95 million available to states and consortium of states to investigate alternatives to the gas tax. In round 1, California was successful and it was awarded $750,000 in federal funding to investigate 3 main elements. You're familiar with that because you supported that effort. The committee did support the effort. The first portion was to investigate a pay-at-the-pump and charge point reporting method that wasn't tested in the pilot. The other portions are organizational framework research and the development of an education and outreach plan. So I'll kind of take one piece at a time, and then we'll kind of go from there. And the first area of development was the investigation of the pay-at-the-pump. Since the December TAC meeting, we released a request for information to both industry, academia, and as far-reaching as we could possibly go. We asked for responses back in February, which we received 11 responses from either individuals, companies, or consortium of companies that grouped together. and 4 of those responders were shortlisted for additional follow-up. We invited those responders in for presentations and Q&A just this week. So Tuesday and Wednesday, we sat down in a room and talked both with my research team and as well as the responders, just to kind of get a better idea of some of the solutions that they brought forward. And right now, we're quickly developing, we're taking the notes and we're developing that into what I'm calling a demonstration plan. It's part of the research that we will be doing from here until the end of the fiscal year. In fact, I don't have a choice. It's a demonstration plan. So in round 1, that was the only opportunity when you went into the FAST Act to do pre-demonstration planning activities. So every other round after that, you have to demonstrate something. You have to pilot something. And so out of this research, we thought, well, it'd be a really good idea to get out and see what the ideas are in terms of collection, a wireless exchange of maybe information between a vehicle and existing infrastructure. And so that's why we call it pay at the pump or charge point. And so from there, I tasked my research team with developing the demonstration plan that subsequently will be demonstrated with round 2 funding. So I'll explain more a little bit in round 2, but round 1 is basically setting up the stage to do the demonstration.
Yeah, anybody, just jump in.
I'm wondering, does Oregon use this technology? I mean, or do other states use this technology? Do we
I don't think so.
need our own?
It's a great question. I don't
Maureen's
think
coming up next
anyone
after this.
uses the current technology, but Oregon had tested this back in 2006, 2007. And so I'm getting a lot of questions of, is this just Oregon again? And I would say no. And I'll put some perspective around it. Back when the Oregon pilot concluded in 2007, well, that was also the first year that the iPhone was introduced, and Android wasn't around yet. And so, we think that technology has moved quite a bit since that time frame. In fact, I can say with conviction that we will not be doing exactly what Oregon did in our pilot, and I think that ours will be heavily contingent on technology and, as much as possible, avoidance of any additional hardware. So that was the big difference, I think, in Oregon, is they had to retrofit vehicles and pumps, and I'm not sure what else, but certainly they had a heavy hardware component to it. I'm trying to eliminate that and seeing if we can use the state of technology in order to create a wireless exchange. So that's my hope. Like I said, I have 2 contracts right now.
Marty's got a
one looking at.
Electric vehicles don't go to a pump.
Correct.
However, they charge by having an electric charge device plugged in. Does the demonstration incorporate an analogous system of charging when charging an electric vehicle, just like charging at the pump for an internal combustion engine?
I'm certainly looking at all potential solutions for electric vehicles. I'm well aware that probably majority of electric vehicles are being charged at home, and those that are being charged using public infrastructure very rarely are being charged a dollar amount for that cost. And so I'm looking at certain options in order to incorporate electric vehicles, because certainly our governor is he's very aggressive on where he thinks we should go in terms of environmental policy in our state. And if we meet his mark, we'll have 5 million electric vehicles on the road by 2020. And so certainly I'm incorporating that into it. And I think why you saw the terminology change, I used to say pay at the pump and charging station, but what is a charging station? Is your home a charging station? So I'm looking at it more as a charge point. Where are these access points to where we can potentially, capture, mileage and utilize it in a way where we can facilitate a road charge concept?
Yeah, and this gets into a lot of what we're going to get into in 2019, assuming the bill continues on.
So are you including protection of people's data?
Absolutely, that's
Because
paramount from
it's hugely paramount. Yeah.
beginning of road charge. I think that stood out as one of, and we really learned that from, I think, Oregon right away, is that, privacy and data security is certainly important at any point of your life where data about you or data about how you potentially are using the road could be captured. And so certainly everything that we do in terms of the research is centered around the protection of privacy and data security of California drivers.
And then, as I've been talking to different people about this, people come back at me with like, well, electric cars are actually just as dirty as gas cars if you include the batteries and the life cycle and all that stuff. And is there, I haven't bothered to look this up online and sort of do my own research on it, so I just wondered, does Caltrans have that type of research, and is that available?
I'd have to imagine that we have a division of research, innovation, and system information, and so they're always researching various elements of transportation, whether it's, ways to improve asphalt or, other areas like even road charge. And so I suspect they do have some of that research ongoing. I'd have to certainly defer to maybe someone in that area to give you a little bit more information on the background of research we have.
Another important thing for the public to kind of
Yeah,
understand.
and I was just noticing we do have some Air Resources Board individuals here that might actually have the answer to that, but they do. So would you want to share the answer to that real quick?
Depend on where you get your electricity from, whether that's a dam or if it's
Yeah.
fossil fuel.
So,
And
Sure,
and identify yourself for the record so we all know who you are.
Yeah, make sure the mic is on here. Joshua Cunningham, I'll be in the panel later this morning, so I can elaborate on this a bit too, but to answer that specific question, for sure, the sources of electricity or hydrogen for fuel cell vehicles will impact the carbon and the cleanliness, but it's absolutely clear in California that the emissions upstream for producing the fuels, when you then look at it compared to gasoline vehicles, it's cleaner now and will continue to get cleaner. And the one benefit with EVs is once you buy an EV, it's one of the only types of vehicles that will get cleaner as you own the car, as the car gets older, because the grid is getting cleaner over time with SB 350 and other laws that are pushing for renewables. So it's a pretty clear case in California.
Does the Air Resources Board have like some simple little thing you can print out that helps explain that? To give to people and...
Yeah, I can't vouch to whether it's simple, but, our most recent work partnering with other state agencies was the scoping plan analysis, which frames up how we're going to get to the SB 32 requirements by 2030. And we do start to talk about strategies for refinery and electricity production from generators. But typically the way it's presented is it's what's called a well-to-wheels analysis, where you look at a new gasoline car compared to a new electric car. You look at the emissions at the tailpipe and the fuel for 1 mile of that car. And you can typically see some easy bar charts to compare those. And in California, it's a pretty clean case.
To include the battery
Yep.
materials also?
Yeah, it is more energy intense to manufacture batteries. So there's a little bit of higher energy consumption at the manufacturing side, but even when you factor that in, EVs are cleaner.
Yeah, as somebody who's been driving an EV since 2013, I always tell folks that the tailpipe on a power plant is much longer than the tailpipe on a car. And people usually can visualize that because, it's just something that cleans air as it comes out. And it's a lot cleaner coming out of a power plant than it would be coming out of a gasoline-powered vehicle. Richard?
Question, Brady. And I've missed a couple of meetings, so I'm sorry. Sure. Just trying to catch up here. The demonstration round 2, is that just looking at how much the consumer is paying at the pump so that that's applied against the road charge, or is that an integrated system that you're looking at?
Well, so I envision it being a reconciliation at the time of sale.
And one other question for Brady. So when will you be able to provide this committee with more details on your actual implementation? And I know it's in process. That will answer a lot of these questions, I think, in the how, the when, the what, where, all that stuff.
So I'm completing the research at the end of June. And from there, I will go right into scope development mode, and we'll begin the procurement process. And then I have to prepare a report to U.S. DOT Secretary Chow by September. And so those are all kind of milestones along the way where I think at the end of June I can provide, the final report research, because that's what I'm going to have to provide it to FHWA.
All right.
Here's a question for you. So we've got the Caltrans pilot project on a user charge, and then we have this user charge committee, this one right here, that may or may not, that may exist after December, with your good efforts, maybe. Probably will. And so my question is, you have this Caltrans effort that's operating sort of separately but parallel to what we're doing. Do they ever, if the committee is reauthorized, do these things ever come back together? Or do we have the road charge committee doing its road charge activities and Caltrans doing its road charge activities sort of indefinitely in parallel? I'm kind of confused about the, and if I was a legislator, this would certainly be my question. Unfortunately, I'm not.
It's a very good question, and fortunately, we have a good partnership, but Susan can.
Yeah, so I'll attempt to answer that question. I see that the work of Caltrans, in this case, and the relationship to the committee, is very similar to the California Transportation Commission. We have a very small staff. Caltrans is really carrying out the day-to-day work and overseeing, obviously overseeing a lot more, but they provide information that the commission requests. In this case, should the TAC, the importance, there's a variety of reasons why the TAC is important, but one of the primary reasons is that this committee provides a public forum for discussion on issues. And Caltrans right now is conducting research, is going to conduct demonstrations. And if it weren't for this committee, that information that Caltrans is gathering and using for decision-making purposes to inform the administration would not be discussed amongst a committee like you all with expertise in different areas in a public setting to receive that public comment and provide that openness and transparency that really needs to exist in this conversation and the potential of a new mechanism to collect revenues that will affect every Californian and beyond. And so there is a very direct nexus. And so the importance of continuing this committee is so that we can continue to bring Caltrans to these meetings to share with you all what they're doing and seek your input and your feedback and the input and feedback of the public should they be interested in sharing their feedback. Right now, when Caltrans, carries out its functions, if it's not something that we put on our agenda, they conduct public outreach. We do know that, and they actually do a very good job of that. But it's a little less, this committee is subject to Bagley-Keene, open meeting laws, and things like that just even further enhance that transparency and accountability. I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, sort of.
Uh-oh.
But I think I'm having an epiphany, but I'm not going to share it. So
Okay.
We'll
have to talk offline.
I'll think about this.
Okay.
I think I'm actually understanding something now.
Yeah, I will just give you everything Susan said, and the fact of the matter is the CTC's mission is significantly different than what Caltrans's mission is. And, CTC serves as an oversight role on a lot of things from a funding standpoint on Caltrans, and again, in a public forum. A lot of the technical things that Caltrans is doing right now on the road charge is just stuff that CTC, A, doesn't have staff for, B, don't have the budget for it, and Caltrans has been able to allocate those funds through the Department of Finance to be able to conduct this important stuff. I would be the first to tell you if I didn't think the partnership was working. You would be hearing from me. Legislators would be hearing from me, and things would have changed. But because, whether it was Carrie and Norma before, and now with Brady and Stephen Keck, I think that we have a very good partnership that makes it work. And that's the key, is to, they aren't doing things without checking with us and vice versa. Steve?
And I would just add that I think the prior legislation confined us fairly tightly to the pilot program, which is done. And I think the new legislation, although the verbiage is not, very extensive, opens that up not only in time, but also in purview. So I think that fits with what I'm hearing.
I guess if I could just add one other aspect to all this. It may, right now, the studies are housed at Caltrans, but there are other departments within the administration that may have a role in all this. And as this discussion continues and the exploration continues, your expertise, the expertise of the members that sit on this committee, are invaluable to informing that process. And so that there's a clear nexus to that. There's an important role to be played by the experts here on this committee. And without that, it's difficult to bring together a group like this in a public setting for that kind of a discussion to take place.
Any other questions, comments on that? Lauren, you good? We'll talk more later. All right, Brady, back to you.
Okay. So I just want to mention very quickly, I'm going to shift gears here. I'll provide, the results of our research in June, and you'll have a lot more information on the demonstration, my plan for demonstration, and anything surrounding the RFI process at that point in time. And the other aspect that we are looking into is organizational framework research. That's something that also came out of the pilot program. And presently, the team is exploring the potential impact to the state of California government if it were to take on the potential administration of a road charge program. I do have Susan Martinovich here today to discuss this effort in Agenda Item 13, so I just wanted to mention it, and then she's going to cover more of that in item number 13. And Jim, I know you're interested in hearing more about our public awareness research results. We're running a little bit behind right now. I can certainly provide the entire TAC, the report that came out of that effort. And we did a survey, a public attitude survey of over 1,300 participants in Northern, Southern, and Central California. 1,000 surveys completed in English, 300 in Spanish. And the results were basically used to look at messaging and creative direction presented in some of the focus groups that we did as well. And so it kind of goes alongside with what Susan had mentioned earlier today in terms of the public attitude stuff. We also did 6 focus groups across the state. The focus groups were in Fresno, Oakland, Riverside, 2 in San Diego because we wanted an English and a Spanish variation, and 1 in Sacramento. And so in the focus groups, we conducted probes into information on the conditions of the roads and maintenance and funding knowledge, perceptions of a road charge, as well as some generic message and creative testing. And so I'd just love to share that with the whole committee, and I can certainly provide some highlights today, but what would you prefer, Chairman
Just
Duffer?
give us, I think, first of all, sending it out to everybody would be great. So if you don't mind doing that, that would be wonderful. Through Garth, we could get that distributed to everybody.
Okay.
And then, give us a couple highlights, because I know you did the focus groups and you did the surveys, and I wasn't able to attend, but I'd be curious to know what the reaction was. And this gets exactly to what you were talking about, Susan, earlier, as we kind of take this data and start feeding it into some messaging as we move into the future.
That sounds good. So let me give you some top-line results from the focus group. So talking about knowledge and attitudes about road repair and maintenance funding, participants overwhelmingly rated road conditions in California poorly. Poor road conditions they've said that poor road conditions have a significant impact on their daily lives, and participants had really limited understanding of funding sources for that. And so this limited knowledge certainly, I think, is a challenge for us moving forward. Knowledge and attitudes about, a few participants had heard of a road charge before, so now we're talking about we introduced road charge as a concept. Participants became more open, though, to the idea of a road charge upon learning it was also being considered by other states. Participants had questions about road charge, how it would impact their bottom line, and which was certainly a driving factor of concerns and some resistance. And in general, unfortunately, the groups reacted negatively to the term road charge. At one that I attended, I think one of the participants actually said, it reminds me of road rage.
Brady, can I ask a quick question? When you ask people about road conditions, were they thinking specifically of the condition of the road, or were they thinking about congestion and other things that road charge really doesn't directly solve?
I think there's sort of an overlap of both, and also too, I think there was a difference in their perception of highways versus local streets and roads too, so it was hard for them to kind of separate the two, but certainly congestion came up, reliability of trips and things like that came up, and so I think there was an overlap of both. And then in terms of just some of the message and creative testing, the messages that were transparent, addressed the issue of fairness, and straightforward were rated the most effective. And participants responded well to terms like stable and sustainable. And messages with judgmental tones, vagueness, and feelings of manipulation were rated ineffective. And participants did not respond well to messages that contradicted their pre-existing beliefs. So those are some of the highlights of the focus groups themselves. I plan on sharing the results of both the survey and the focus groups to the committee, and we'll get that going as soon as I get back to Sacramento. And otherwise, just quick highlight, round 2, the demonstration, California was awarded $1.7 million. We're going to demonstrate a pay at the pump or charge point demonstration, and so that's the charge. I'll be writing scope here towards the latter portion of this year.
And just again, and the whole pay at the pump model, the idea behind it is to figure out a way, as we learned in the pilot, it was very administratively intense. As you all recall, that was the biggest downside. The gas tax is currently collected at a number of terminals where the gas is then loaded into trucks. So when you see those tanker trucks driving down the freeway or the local roads, the gas tax has already been paid that's in those trucks. And then it's put into the retail distribution points, and it's pumped out into cars. The idea is to figure out a way to where if the pump says $3 a gallon on the pump, and you pull up and your car is equipped with the technology, and again, to the point earlier, when Oregon did it, the iPhone didn't even exist. And talking to Jim Whitty, he said that, the technology today is so much more advanced, it'll be a lot easier. So getting out an RFI, getting Silicon Valley to weigh in and say, hey guys, what can you do to help come up with a system? And it could be as simple as Bluetooth, a Bluetooth device in the car, a Bluetooth device in the pump. You pull up, the two vehicle and the pump talk to each other, the amount of miles you drove since the last time you fueled goes into the pump. So you have a vehicle equipped like that now, where you look at the price, it says $3 a gallon, or $4, whatever it is today. I don't buy gas, remember? Let's say you pull up and it says $4 a gallon, but now because your vehicle's equipped with the pay by the mile system, now the real price shows up. I don't know, let's say it's $3.25 a gallon, none of the taxes are included. And all it does, you put 20 bucks in or you put in your card, it simply will take out of the amount the number of miles you drove times whatever the rate is, and that is how you pay. Totally behind the scenes to the consumer, just like the gas tax is today. Remember, most of the consumers didn't even realize that they were paying a gas tax. So that's a very simplistic way of looking at it, but as I remember we were reading about it, and again, this is going back to some of our stuff several years ago, there's not that many gas stations in California. There's not that many in the whole country, less than 100,000. It's a small number. So the cost to do that and change that over is going to be a lot less than the administrative burden that we saw in the pilot. And that's part of the idea as we move forward into this next step. So it's really good to see the FAST Act was in place and giving us these tools to be able to pilot this stuff. And so we'll hear more about it. We'll probably find a spot in California to do it with a closed loop of folks. Brady?
Quick, is your demonstration going to focus on the technology and how it works, or will it also look at usability and sort of human factors issues?
It would incorporate both. And obviously security. And just really quick, notice a funding opportunity for round 3 was announced on Friday, April 13th. There's $20 million available for states to compete for additional research. And so Certainly, my life got a little bit more complex as of last Friday, and all the applications are due to the Federal Highway Administration by July 15th. And so right now, I'm just discussing that internally with Caltrans leadership, and certainly would be open to discussing it more with the commission staff and Chairman Daffer and the committee as well.
All right, Garth?
One thing I just wanted to mention real quick, unfortunately, we didn't have time to discuss this due to agenda constraints, more in depth in terms of all the work that Caltrans is working on, but staff is recommending at the September meeting to have a more in-depth discussion on a lot of the research that Caltrans is conducting regarding road charge.
Cool. Well, very good. Well, we are running a little behind, which is not like this group, so we'll try to get ourselves back on track. Let's, if there's nothing else on that, let's move to item 9 on the agenda. And we're really fortunate to have Maureen Bach here, who is the program manager of the Oregon Road Charge Program, or as it's known, ORIGO, and it's administered by the Oregon Department of Transportation. And they have been a national leader. And as many of you know, we spent a lot of time with Jim Whitty and folks that were there from the beginning when we first started out in early 2015. So thanks again, Maureen, for making the trip down here to kind of give us an opportunity about what you guys have been up to and how we can learn from Oregon. All right, and Doug's going to make sure the mic's on.
Retrofit cars. I ran the fuel tax program at the time, so Jim and I went back and forth over the relative merits of fuel tax versus road user fees and back and forth, and I got to process lots and lots of refunds for people that did participate. And then in 2012, our road user fee task force said, please do another pilot, look at some of the things around privacy, so that was completed. That was really the foundation for Senate Bill 810 that passed in the 2013 session, which enabled us to do ORIGO. And we call ourselves an operational pilot. The book on the right is actually an evaluation we did last year about our pilot and what we anticipate going forward. The current program, like I said, went live July 1st, 2015. I showed up back at ODOT in October 2014. At that time, we were still negotiating our contracts for account management services and getting ready for the go-live date. At the time, we were authorized to charge 1.5 cents per mile, which coincided with our 30-cent per gallon fuel tax rate. In 2017, House Bill 2017 was enacted. It raised the fuel tax rate to 34 cents. We then went ahead and were able to raise our rec rate to 1.7 cents per mile, which we did, and it made it effective January 1st of this year. We have been very big on telling the public that the fuel tax they pay is a prepayment of road charging if they're in the program. That actually seems to resonate with them. They understand that more than we're giving them a credit and trying to explain that. So that's one of the things that's been pretty effective. We continue to have about 700 vehicles in the program. We have an automated interface with our Driver and Motor Vehicle Services Division at ODOT, and that allows us to, our account managers, to determine the eligibility of vehicles for the program. Because we have statutory constraints of vehicle weight of 10,000 pounds, gross vehicle weight rating or less, and then we have different fuel bins that they are eligible for as well. So that is an automated interface we built with DMV, and that enables our account managers to get that information very quickly. In addition to running this current program, we also have some projects we're doing. We have Fast Act projects we're working on, one of which is testing the equipment we use currently to see if it can also do emissions testing. So we're working with our Department of Environmental Quality on that. That looks like it will probably go live midsummer. And then we have a project that we're doing under the FAST Act grant, which we're asking for people enrolled in the program to voluntarily give granular information about their trips to the account manager, who will anonymize it and then share it with our Transportation Development Division for traffic modeling purposes. So that is in the sign-up phase right now. In addition, we are currently working with the state of Washington on an interoperability pilot, and that is about to go, well, we actually went live the beginning of this month, I guess. So that's a body of work that my 6 people and I are working on. And we are looking at new technologies, because when we had a short period of time to go live, we went live with that device that plugs in the onboard diagnostic port of the vehicle. So that's what we currently use in the program. We have both a basic device, which is not GPS enabled, and then we have the GPS enabled device. Privacy protection is part of what was in our Senate Bill 810, which enabled us to do this program. So what that requires is our account managers to destroy the data about the trips within 30 days after account settlement, which means payment, or if there's a dispute about those charges after that occurs. So we audit our account managers to make sure that's done, and we get information about them from how many calls they get about their devices, that kind of thing. So we are actually monitoring our account managers on a number of areas through our service level agreements. And then, you know how this works, but that's kind of an overview. We certify account managers and devices to be used in the program. They collect the information about trips. They provide value-added services. People enrolled pay the account manager. They aggregate the data. They send us mileage information aggregated, and they send us money. And then we oversee them. If they want to make a change to their program, they negotiate with us. What have we learned? That the little device we currently use does not support all vehicles, so for this to become a mandatory, successful, sustainable funding source, we need to find ways that we can support all vehicles that would be subject to a mandate. The onboard diagnostic port device works in post-1996 vehicles with internal combustion engines. It works pretty well in EVs, although there's some artisanal algorithms that need to be developed for that to happen. We know that enforcement will drive costs depending on what kinds of enforcement mechanisms are actually in place in the future, and we will be going to our Road User Fee Task Force in May with some recommendations. It's important to be technology neutral. We focus on getting the information that we need in the format we need it. Our account managers can innovate, and that's one reason to have effective private sector relations, so they can bring new technology to the table that works in new vehicles as vehicles change. And it's important for the public to have choices. Most people that are enrolled in the program currently have opted for the GPS-enabled device because they like the value-added services that come with that choice. We think that as we certify new technologies, that will open it up to other people and give them better choices as well. We also found through public opinion surveys and volunteer surveys that experience with the program increases comfort. People that have been participants in the program generally have more comfort with road usage charging as a funding mechanism than the general public. We still have challenges, and you have the same challenges here: public perception and acceptance. Most people do not understand how transportation funding works now, so getting them up to speed on that and then changing their minds about how this can help in the future is important. We're working on that through our FAST Act grant. Enforcement, currently as in a voluntary program, we don't really have any enforcement except kicking people out of the program. It's important that we demonstrate that the data that supports their charges is accurate. We need the ability to support all programs, and then, of course, getting critical mass so we can have a cost-to-revenue ratio that it makes sense is key. And with that, I will leave it, and then I have some other things I'll discuss this afternoon. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much. So I heard you say that users liked the GPS with the value-added aspects to it, and I think we heard about that also in our pilot study last year. But that has that two-edged sword, because those value-added services are where the privacy leaks happen. I mean, those are the places where, it's just like people that, want to go to Facebook or whatever, they claim they're making a conscious decision to sign up for those value-added services, but many of those value-added services do take the private data, and I think that the user community is not necessarily aware of that. Like, oh, cool, new app, right? And they go for the new app, and they've lost their privacy. So I think if we have a mission to make sure we're providing options and opportunities that are privacy preserving, we'll need to think about that trade.
Good point.
Can I ask it just, this isn't, I haven't been paying attention. I'm confused. I thought that the Oregon road charge was statewide, everybody was doing it, but what you talked about today suggests that you're still in a pilot phase. Educate me.
Okay, it is a statewide program, but it is a voluntary program. The 1.7 cents is for driving within the state, and people volunteer to be part of the program.
And you have 700 people, is that what you said?
Current, yes.
I see, and for those people who sign up, is it because they're driving, old vehicles and they want to save a bit of money, or is it, why would someone sign up?
Actually, about a third of the vehicles in the program are driving vehicles get more than 22 miles per gallon. About a third are in another statutory bin of 17 mpg to 22, and then about a third are in the under 17 mpg category.
And do you have any electric vehicle drivers in the program?
We do, actually. We have 12 EVs enrolled in the program of the 700, and House Bill 2017, which was enacted in 2017, actually gave electric vehicle owners the opportunity to be enrolled in the program to avoid payment of an enhanced registration fee.
Richard?
Yeah, getting back to the privacy issue, I didn't remember, but it sounds like I'm hearing now that Origo does not have essentially a public option in terms of an account administrator. The state is not an option.
We contracted that function out. So we do have an ODOT account manager, and it offers the basic device, which is a non-GPS enabled device, and it's done through a private company.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just, again, say we've had this discussion over the last years, but I think that it's important for residents who are particularly concerned about privacy, and Facebook is on everybody's minds right now, and it's not going away. The profit motive is something that people are, starting to pay attention to when it comes to privacy breaches, and I think it's very important for us to make sure that there's a public option, so to speak.
Makes sense. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, Lauren?
What was the barrier you mentioned about using the GPS unit in electric vehicles?
Because those devices were actually originally to monitor emissions, and EVs don't have emissions, those algorithms that are in those ports are different than they are for internal combustion engines. So the pins don't actually map exactly the same way as they do it for internal combustion engines compared to EVs.
But can that be adjusted?
Yes, and that's what's happening. So the vehicles we have in the program currently are, like I said, using artisanal sorts of algorithms to get that information
Is it
out.
burdensome, expensive, and does it keep people from participating in and of itself?
It has not.
Okay, thank you.
We actually have very good support from Forth, which is our electric vehicle advocacy group in Oregon, and they've been big supporters.
Other questions? Well, I know we'll see you in a little bit. Thank you, Maureen, very much. Appreciate it. So at this point, let's go ahead and move on into our panel discussion. And really what we want to do here is talk about the whole issue of autonomous zero-emission vehicles, commercial and government fleets, and I want to thank again Garth and Susan for working on, as we assembled a really well-versed and well-rounded group of representatives, talk about their views on how road charge could be adopted here in California. And so for the next hour or so, let's just make this an informal Q&A exchange of what they think might be helpful for the TAC as we prepare our recommendations for the legislature. So with that, let me turn it over to Garth, who will introduce each of the panel members, and he'll help us in, I'm going to ask Garth if you wouldn't mind facilitating the discussion with the panel today. That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, that the commission is looking at the road charge TAC to help provide input on recommendations that we'll be talking about today. And one of the recommendations moving forward would be that if the legislature does decide to implement a road charge, that it could be phased in rather than require all registered vehicles to comply at once. As currently envisioned, the initial phased-in approach would include autonomous vehicles, zero-emission vehicles, commercial vehicles such as trucks, and government vehicles. The panel we have composed today will help inform these recommendations. Rather than formal presentations, as Chair Madaffer said, we'll just kind of have an informal discussion. And I've got some questions prepared, but then also we look to the TAC members to ask questions as well. Each of the panel members will be providing an opening statement, and I would ask for the webinar if each of the panel members would come up to the podium, if possible, to make that opening statement. And then after that, the opening statements, then we'll go ahead and go into the kind of the informal Q&A type of format. And with that, I wanted to introduce each of the panel members. And first of all, we have Joshua Cunningham, who's the chief of the Advanced Clean Cars branch at the California Air Resources Board. Eric Sauer, as we all know, is Senior Vice President of Policy and Government Relations at the California Trucking Association. And then Laura Biesto. I was stressing you weren't going to come here, Laura, so I'm glad you made it. She's the Public Policy Manager at Lyft. And lastly, we have Evan Spear, who is the Chief of the Office of Fleet and Asset Management at the California Department of General Services. And with that, we can turn it over to, I don't know, Eric, do you want to start, or how do we want to do it?
In essence, the time you want, since I've already kind of
Okay.
down a few times, I can go last and let these folks.
Okay, Joshua, would you like to?
Good. Thank you, Garth, and committee members for having us here. So let me just say a few comments relative to our mission and our focus, because it tees into the focus of the panel, which is looking at the particularly electric vehicle applications for the road user charge and alternatives. So obviously our mission at the Air Resources Board is on protecting the environment and addressing greenhouse gas emission reductions. The vast majority of our programs historically and today are about reducing the emissions and improving the carbon intensity of mobile sources. With that comes two large implications as we look to meet the requirements of SB 32 and the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. The two large implications are that typically the vehicles need to become more efficient and we need to be moving increasingly towards electric. Both of those trends clearly push towards the challenge we have with the current road financing, which is the gas tax. So gas demand goes down with both of those trends. I thought that was really well framed up, Brady, in the road user pilot study in the fall. Really a good description of not only the current disconnect with that highway trust fund and the gas tax collection, but also these trends going forward. Somebody had mentioned earlier the 5 million vehicle count that is in the scenarios we have to meet the SB 32 requirements by 2030, close to 5 million vehicles by 2030. The governor's now put that into a target. So at the Air Board, as we do look at strategies moving beyond current rules, we do see electrification playing a key role. And I'll just mention a couple of statistics. The 5 million vehicles, if we do see that come into effect by 2030, would represent about 15% of all the cars on the road. So in only 12 years from now, if that is what occurs, we will see a pretty sizable chunk of the gas demand gone and the gas tax revenue that comes along with it. So it's I would call it a relatively near-term or mid-term issue. It's not pie in the sky. So finding some alternatives now is important. I'll just close by saying we're very interested in being engaged in this conversation. You know, we are about addressing the environment, but we recognize that mobility we want to see mobility maintained. We want to improve the cleanliness of it, but mobility is critical for our economy. We don't want to see that go away. But the way that we deal with the emissions inherently puts us at odds with the road fee collection system, and so we want to look for an alternative. So thank you for having me.
Laura?
Thank you, Deputy Director Hopkins, for inviting Lyft here today. I was very much looking forward and committing to attending from the beginning. Not to worry, I was going to be here. Just ran a little late in my Lyft, so. No. And Commissioner Madaffer, thank you as well for having me. Nice to see you, and thank you to the Transportation Commission for having me here. Lyft, as hopefully some of you have tried our service before, our competitor, but Lyft was founded with the mission of creating the world's best transportation system and improving people's lives through doing that. And we think we've already been proven to be a resource of positive change in a couple different ways. There's the economic empowerment aspect for our drivers. We think we've improved roadway safety. We have improved roadway safety. We also have connected communities that have been traditionally underserved by traditional transportation methods, which we think is a huge deal. We also have increased people's willingness to share the ride, get in a car with people they don't necessarily know, and give up their cars or use of their cars. And really, we want to make transportation, as I said, the best, and we want to make car ownership optional for everyone globally, although we're only in the US and Canada at this point. And to that end, we feel like we're just at the beginning with our traditional transportation service. And a central part of our mission being that we want to make car ownership optional. We see AVs as a main pathway to get there. We think AVs will play a pivotal role in people finally being able to give up their car when there's widespread adoption of autonomous vehicles. And we see AVs coming on our network in two different ways. First, we envision having an open network where the world's best autonomous vehicle manufacturers can put their vehicles on the Lyft network, which has millions of passengers at this point, and it will be integrated with our classic Lyft rides where people are using their peer-to-peer, giving peer-to-peer rides, using their own personal vehicles. We also believe that we are going to be able to put our own self-driving cars on that same network. We're developing a self-driving system in our Palo Alto office. We believe that our autonomous vehicles will also be on our network. All of this is with the singular goal of having everything on a single network to serve our nationwide group of passengers and build this world's best transportation system. We're very happy to be here today. We've written a number of different articles on ways we want to reduce congestion, and we want to encourage people to share the ride. And while we aren't opposed to different methods for doing so, we are here to advocate for those methods being applied across the board. And one of the big issues is that our drivers are driving circumstantially. They are driving for a different reasons. Not, I'd say it's nearly 90% are part-time drivers. Very few drive full-time, and over 90% are looking for full-time work, are full-time students, are retired. People are driving for a lot of different reasons, and they drive for very short periods of time. They could be in the summer if they're a teacher. They could be between jobs. It could be just to supplement to make a certain goal is a very common thing we see. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about the different reasons people drive, because I think there's an assumption that when you decide to drive on Lyft or other platforms, you're going all in, this is going to be your full-time job, and it's actually quite the contrary. The majority of our drivers are part-time, and the beauty of the platform is you're able to use something that is a depreciating asset in your garage, more or less, and make some extra money on the side. And that's what we've been, that's why a lot of our advocacy work is promoting, widespread congestion pricing or a widespread road charge fee, as opposed to, singling out this population of drivers that is actually fairly hard to track over a long period of time, given that they're not necessarily on the platform for a long period of time, and they have no obligations as to when they drive or where they drive. Drivers are able to drive wherever and whenever they want as independent contractors. I'm happy to answer any questions and very happy to be here today. Thank you.
All right, echoing the other panel members, I just wanted to say thank you to the commission as well as to Garth for the invitation to participate in the panel today. I I wanted to give a little context on what the Office of Fleet and Asset Management does, our role, and why we have a vested interest in kind of the outcome of this committee. So the Office of Fleet and Asset Management, we are really the policy and oversight agency for the state's 50,000 fleet assets. So whenever we get a legislative or executive mandate, we are the ones that ensure that it happens. We operationalize that. We turn that into statewide policy. So the governor's executive order for zero-emission vehicle adoption within the state fleet, we ensure compliance with that. We're also kind of the central manager for the state fleet. So we control the central data repository for all state fleet assets. If something like a usage charge were to be rolled out, we would likely be the agency that's in charge of ensuring that it gets rolled out effectively. So we have a vested interest in making sure that it's something that is feasible and can work for not only our fleet, but other government agency fleets. We also have mandates to reduce petroleum consumption as well as adopt zero-emission vehicles. So since 2003, we've seen a 20 to 30% decrease in petroleum consumption within the state fleet. That is going to continue to go down. So as that goes down, obviously the amount that we pay in to the state to make sure that our roads are maintained is going to decrease. So that's my short little intro. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we just wanted to go to the Q&A portion, and I just wanted to first ask if any of the TAC members had any questions, in terms of how a road charge could be possibly implemented, for AVs or ZEVs or, commercial fleets or government fleets as well. If not, I've got Mr. Kay.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Laura. Well, first, I just want to tell you how much I agree that there shouldn't be any discrimination on this fee, or frankly any other fee, based on who the driver is and what the nature of if it's a light duty vehicle, it's a light duty vehicle. I don't think there should be any discrimination in that regard. My question is maybe a little more general, and if this is something you can answer. And I've never thought about this, so I don't have an agenda in asking the question. I've literally never thought of this before, but who is, in your business model, who is responsible for the variable costs of the vehicle? Is that the driver's risk? Is it the passenger's risk? Is it the platform's risk?
Thank you for that question. For insurance purposes, we have commercial insurance for all rides throughout the United States and Canada. We're required by law to commercially insure rides from the point a driver even has the app on, even if they're doing something else, even if they have multiple apps on, if they have our competitor's app on, or they're doing a delivery service, we still are commercially insuring that ride up to certain amounts. Once a driver is going to go pick up a passenger or has a passenger in the car, it's insured up to $1 million, which is, it's pretty high, but it's a nationwide insurance deal. So we are paying for that insurance. Drivers, typically, they have to have their own insurance in California, but that is not necessarily related to commercial insurance, which is what we do provide. So insurance costs are something we cover, commercial insurance costs. In terms of gas and other wear and tear, that is on the individual independent contractor driver.
I had a question, but before that, I want to echo Lauren's comment about sort of non-discrimination. A mile by a light-duty vehicle is a mile by a light-duty vehicle, so I appreciate that. I think part of the reason for this panel is, I think as we've been talking about for a while and thinking about towards the future, is how to implement a road charge, how to really implement a road charge. And I think the mind sort of goes to either limited groups of vehicles based on either just their numbers or possibly their technology. So I think that brings up EVs, that brings up AVs, that brings up maybe certain commercial vehicles, and part of the reason for the panel here, and government fleets, et cetera. So I guess the question I have is maybe from everybody, what are your thoughts on that, about possibly being the leading edge of implementation, which might, from a practical standpoint, may make a lot of sense, and just want to know if there are any thoughts, pros or cons or concerns about that.
Yeah, I'll just take a stab at that. I mean, I will, as Garth has teed up in some of the topics, the key question is, do you phase that in on certain technology groups? And I would say that ARB is supportive, but we want to be part of the conversation, see how it's implemented, supportive of that being phased in on EVs as one area. Part of that is because under the SB1 with the new flat fee, that's the right first step to ensure the electric vehicles are paying into the road revenue system. But a flat fee is not an efficient system relative to the use of the roads. It doesn't, it's not variable based on how much the users use the system. So we are.
Well, if it's per mile, then it is based on how much they use the system.
But the SB1 is not, so it's a flat fee
per
year. Yes.
Fair enough. I'm thinking about road charge. Go ahead.
Yeah, but so I'm connecting those dots because I think we're supportive of exploring the road user charge mechanism on EVs initially as one of the phase-in groups, because we'd like to move beyond that flat fee system and maybe phase that out as road user fee comes in on EVs. I would just add on autonomous vehicles. I don't know if I have an opinion on whether that should be phased in initially before EVs, but I'll say that technology certainly has the risks of mileage being relatively high, and so when you start looking at other motivations, that's something we're looking to.
Are there other thoughts?
Sure, I'll chime in really quick. So, and the state fleet regularly, to answer your question about being at that kind of leading edge, the state fleet is often used to be at that leading edge, whether it's through, the legislature or through executive mandates, kind of a lead by example model from the governor's office, especially in terms of sustainability efforts. So it is not something that we are not familiar with, and obviously we would, anything that the administration would like us to go along with, we will go along with. I believe that there is absolutely ability to accomplish, with options and caveats, to accomplish a usage or a road charge within how we operate as a state fleet. So.
Thanks for your question. I'm happy to comment just briefly on autonomous vehicles. I think there's an assumption that there's going to be widespread adoption sooner than there actually will be. I know Lyft has put out some estimates, and I know we are striving for that on our own internal platform that we're building our own self-driving system. Of course, we also hope to do that even faster through some of our partners that we hope to enable them to put their self-driving system on our platform. But I think there is an assumption that widespread adoption will be much faster than it is for AVs, and I think reliance on that assumption could lead to, revenue not gaining the revenue that is being anticipated or estimated. I think that should be cautioned. I just don't think that autonomous vehicles are going to get everyone the revenue they're looking for as fast as they're looking for it. So I'd caution against that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate and agree with that comment very much.
I can be brief on, obviously, we don't really have a position as far as implementation on autonomous trucks. We do support the testing and deployment of those vehicles to see if they could work in certain applications and whatnot. But I can share a few comments as far as the technology aspect of the current makeup of the industry. It's not your grandfather's trucking industry anymore or your father's industry anymore. The technology that exists for trucks is, and I think in large part, plays a role in post-regulations that the industry has been subject to. For example, the CARB regulations, on-road truck and bus rule. Folks were asked and obviously required to upgrade their fleets, and these are sizable investments that motor carriers had to make into complying with the rule. And just, to express our position, post-rules, our organization chose a pro-compliance position. Rules are on the book, enforce those rules. Folks, our members and the trucking industry as a whole has part of the regulation, obviously, to upgrade those fleets are expensive equipment, so they want to monitor the performance, the safety aspects of the vehicle, the telematics the options that are available to owners of those vehicles is a lot more prevalent now than in years past. Obviously, there's been a lot in the news as far as electronic logging devices. Folks, I think, when they were purchasing the newer equipment, there's been talk of moving from a paper logbook to an electronic logging device that would monitor hours of service. A lot of carriers would purchase that equipment knowing that this would be coming soon. So there are a lot of technology options out there within the industry as a whole. As far as adopting for a road charge, I think later on in the panel discussion I can elaborate a little bit more as far as some of our members that participated in it, our organization's position on participating in the pilot, and where we are currently as far as a road charge concept or ultimate adoption in the state.
Are there any other questions, or I'll start off, and Eric, since you had the mic on, keep that mic on. And you've got the honor of having the longest questions.
Oh, great.
So be prepared there.
I noticed that. There's a few in here.
First of all, and you kind of already elaborated on this, but, can you kind of discuss what the California Trucking Association's position on the recent road charge pilot demonstration program, was, and then did you receive any feedback from your members regarding the pilot and their involvement on the pilot program? And then lastly, do you think some of your members would support a second road charge if there was one ever, that was proposed?
So I'll go back a little bit prior to the first meeting with this group. We were asked to be on the advisory committee as one of the road user participants that are part of the TAC. Obviously, we have to run everything through our board, and so our board, there's been a lot of talk about transitioning to a road charge type system. It's no secret that current revenues coming in are way off the mark from previous because of fuel economy and electric vehicles and everything that we've been talking about today. So we understood that transportation funding, I don't want to say is in crisis mode in California, but it's a big issue. Obviously, with the passage of SB1, it addresses what we call bridge funding for what is actually needed in the state. So we wanted to participate on the TAC, but what people don't realize is part of the language that specified what types of vehicles or what was going to be tested for the pilot only specified gasoline. Diesel was not in there. Our board wanted to participate, or asked that we participate in a small sample size to see if this is something that could work for the industry, the pros and cons, and if it doesn't work for the industry, we would have the information that would we could provide in discussions down the road for future road charge discussions or pilots, or if the state wants to move to something like that. So the board did approve us to participate, and I believe 10 of our members did participate in the pilot. I believe there's 55 vehicles that were part of the testing. I only talked to a couple of them. I think it might behoove if there is going to be a second round of testing, especially with commercial vehicles, maybe have a focus group with those participants and kind of extract from them what worked, what didn't work, because I'm only working on a small sample size of folks that responded to my inquiries as far as providing me information. For the most part, the product that they were using E-Road in their system, and E-Road is a CTA member. They provide a whole range of services, technology-based, for the commercial industry. So our members were pretty familiar with the company and the system and what they provide. They thought that the service was extremely good. System they had positive thoughts on the system. The mileage, tracking and accuracy of that mileage. One carrier in particular said that they were happy with the 92% number that they had as far as verifying mileage, which, I mean, sounds good. That's better than what I would get in college on scores and grades and whatnot. But for fuel funds, transportation funds, 92%, that 8% missing is huge. So if that is one carrier who has a few trucks in it and 92% was the mark, which is an A, for transportation funding purposes, that's a pretty sizable hole for funds coming into the state from a road charge type system. So obviously that's something that would need to be looked at. Rural areas were somewhat of a challenge for these folks. Didn't get too much in the weeds on with the members that participated on the specifics on that, but they did say that rural area tracking was an issue. So obviously that's a very big issue that obviously needs to be addressed or looked into. And off-road, which for some folks that make deliveries, for example, a construction site, driving off-road to a project site, those off-road miles were not tracked, which carriers can get a fuel tax credit for off-road miles. And so company I spoke with had some concerns about that, obviously, is making sure that, things are in sync and in line. The reporting aspect of it, they thought was really good. They are working with E-Road, apparently, to develop some other reports that they might be able to look to utilize down the road if there is a future pilot. And to answer your question, would we support participating in a second pilot? I can't answer that right now, obviously, but I think us being our board approving, supporting the extension of the TAC is a sign that we still are interested in participating. So when the time comes to participate in the pilot, I would, obviously make the recommendation to our members to follow what our position has historically been with this group. Questions?
Eric, just a couple clarifying questions.
Garth, did I answer them? Did I miss any?
So, we had 6 fleets that were submitted into the pilot, I think. Do you know how many actually kept the service after the pilot?
I'm not too sure. I know that this group, one of the groups that I talked to in particular, migrated to another service. But for the most part, they were very pleased with the service and the product and the technology. I know that E-Road offers a very good wide range of products and services that our members do utilize. So, but to answer the question, that's something that obviously within the working group, you have to kind of message the questions and whatnot a little differently. But I think a focus group with the participants would behoove your efforts.
Okay. You talked about the accuracy, you're saying 92%. And so how was that measured by the participant? Were they keeping manual logs of that?
I'm not too sure. This is just quick, easy information that they responded to, that they ran through their ops. So I could find out for you, though.
And then just to clarify that, we weren't tracking anybody in the pilot, and so it was mileage reporting. I did never receive any location information on anybody that participated in the pilot, and that was very paramount in Senate Bill 1077, and so just wanted to clarify that. That was just mileage buckets of either chargeable or non-chargeable miles. And so the account managers handled some of that information. It never made it to the state of California government.
Okay, Evan, how many cars did you mention, or how many vehicles are in the state fleet again?
We have approximately 50,000 fleet assets. 30,000 of those are on-road passenger vehicles.
Oh, okay, it's about 30, okay. And then, of those vehicles, do you currently monitor the mileage, of the state fleet, and if so, how often? And then kind of a secondary is, have you guys, at the Department of General Services, given any thought in terms of, what it would take to outfit state government, state vehicles, for a road charge program?
Sure. So to answer your first question, yes, we do require that state agencies that own fleet assets report to us on a monthly basis. We require that they report to us because like I said, we are the oversight body for the state fleet, so we check utilization levels, make sure that assets are being used properly. We also have to compile reports that go up to the governor's office or the legislature, and we need that data. What I would say on data collection is that while we receive it in kind of a data repository online, most of the collection that's done is manual. So it is done by mileage logs out in the field, reported to kind of a regional office, and that regional office will upload it into our system. So the data is fully dependent on the operators of the vehicle. So there's data integrity or completeness issues at times. We are trying to move over to more automated systems, plug-in telematics or onboard telematics systems. Caltrans has been kind of a leader in this area. They're the first kind of major fleet-owning department within the state of California government to adopt telematics as kind of a standard on their fleet assets. My office, we will be developing statewide policy fairly soon that should push more fleet-owning departments towards a telematics, a plug-in telematics solution. We hope to get there one day where it's a fully automated reporting system where it just feeds right into our central data repository. In terms of implementing a usage or road fee, what would be needed, it really depends. It depends on what's being offered, right? So the Caltrans pilot, the options that were put out there in terms of manual, kind of mileage reporting, or using onboard telematics or plug-in devices, I think that for the state of California, we would need all of those options to be something that's available for us. We have many departments that lag in kind of their fleet management, technology adoption, that may need to still utilize that option of manually reporting their miles through our system and having it uploaded or going over to an account manager. Other departments such as Caltrans or other forward-thinking fleet management departments will likely take advantage of kind of those automated technology solutions. So if we have those solutions available and a variety of solutions available, I think absolutely it's something that we can do and do relatively, I want to say easily, but it's within our control, right? Privacy, security, another big issue. For us, being a public agency, most of our data is available to the public, so we don't have as many privacy concerns as the regular citizen. However, we have a lot of assets that are assigned to undercover police officers. So location information, if that is being captured and being sent off to an account manager, that would be a concern that those agencies have. So again, if you had an option, those may be a manual or had some security protocols where it limited the viewability of location information or just removed it altogether, that may be something that kind of gets those departments over the hump.
Okay, so basically, I mean, the governor could issue an executive order, then right almost to make
Absolutely.
it happen.
If the governor
Okay.
issued an executive order, we would get it done. Yes.
Okay.
Hey, Garth, what I think we ought to do, since it's right about 12 noon on the dot, and this is very engaging discussion, why don't we take a 15-minute break? We've got lunch in the other room. I don't know if everybody's comfortable or not doing this, but I might suggest we just all come back. I always like to end these meetings earlier than we're supposed to, so if we can just work through lunch, would that be okay with the committee? All right, so why don't we say this, it's 12 now, let's reconvene here, we'll keep the panel going at 12. The panelists, you can't get up and go to lunch, no, I'm just kidding. We'll reconvene at 12:15 and bring our lunches in here, yeah.
Where's the room?
Yeah. Doug will show us where to go. All right, thank you, so